This meeting.
Good evening, good morning to everyone. We will begin now with the opening recitations.
好，我们现在一起来做晚课。Chopra Jepa Tham Chege Se Jepe Ma Nang Ka Dang Nyam Pe Sen Chen Tham Che De Wa Dan Den Dung Yao Dan De Nu Du Lan Me Pa Yang Thabra So Pe Chan Chu Rin Po Je To Par Je De Je De Sama Ge Ki Par Du Long A Yisum Ge Wa La Ko Ma Shi Par Du Long A Yisum Ge Wa La Ko Du Dereng Ne Tsung Te Ne Ma San Ta Sam Ki Par Du Long A Yisum Ge Wa La Ko Song Ge Jodan So Ki Cho Nam La Chang Chu Par Du Ta Ne Kyab Su Che Da Ge Jin Su Ke Pe So Nang Ke Jola Pencher Sanje Dru Pra Sho Sanje Jodan So Ki Cho Nam La Chang Chu Par Du Ta Ne Kyab Su Che Dagi Jinsu Gibe Sonang Ke Drola Penche Sanje Dru Prashu Sanje Jodan Sogi Chonam La Chanchu Pardu Dhani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinsu Gibe Sonang Ke Drola Penche Sanje Dru Prashu Kadang Nyampe Senchen Tamche Dewa Dang Dewe Gindan Dembra Girji Dung Yao Dang Dung Yao Gi Gyudan Drawa Girji Dung Yao Mepe Dewa Dame Drawa Girji Nering Chadang Nidang Drawe Tang Nyang Lan Hebra Girji Manang Kadang Nyampe Senchen Tamche Dewa Dang Dewe Gindan Dembra Girji Dung Yao Dang Dung Yao Gi Gyudan Drawa Girji Dung Yao Mepe Dewa Dame Drawa Girji Nering Chadang Nidang Drawe Tang Nyang La Nebra Girji Manang Kadang Nyampe Senchen Tamche Dewa Dang Dewe Gindan Dembra Girji Dung Yao Dang Dung Yao Gi Gyudan Drawa Girji Dung Yao Mepe Dewa Dame Drawa Girji Nering Chadang Nidang Drawe Tang Nyang La Nebra Girji. Now the 7-branch worship we will do in English, Spanish, Chinese simultaneously. In all the worlds of the 10 directions reside Tathagatas of the 3 times. Before each of you, lions among humans, I prostrate joyfully with body, speech, and mind. By the power of this aspiration to noble deeds, all conquerors appear vividly in my mind. With as many bodies as there are atoms in all lands, I prostrate to all you conquerors. In each atom are Buddhas numberless as atoms, all in the midst of the heirs of the Buddhas. Thus I conceive of this Dharmadhatu as completely filled with you conquerors in this way. With infinite oceans of praise and oceans of diverse melodies, I sing the excellent qualities of all you conquerors and praise all of you gone to bliss.
with the best flowers and best garlands, best music, ointments, and excellent parasols, finest lamps and superior incense, I offer to you, conquerors. With excellent garments and best fragrances, and sandalwood powder heap high as Mount Meru, all wondrous offerings perfectly arranged, I offer to you, conquerors. These vast and unequal offerings to each and every one of you, conquerors, with the power of conviction in noble deeds, I prostrate and offer to all you, conquerors. All the harmful deeds that I have done with my body, speech, and mind, under the power of desire, hatred, and ignorance, I confess each and every one of them. I rejoice in all the meritorious deeds of all conquerors in the 10 directions and the heirs of the Buddhas, solitary realizers, hearers still in training and beyond, and all wandering beings. You who are lamps of the worlds of the 10 directions, who have unobstructedly attained Buddhahood through the stages of Bodhi, all you who are my protectors, please turn the unexhaled wheel of Dharma. With palms together, I earnestly beseech you who may intend to manifest final nirvana, please remain for as many eons as there are atoms in the world, for the happiness and well-being of all wandering beings. Whatever slight virtue that may have been gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate to complete Bodhi. And now the brief mandala offering and request for the teachings. This ground sprinkled with scented waters and strewn with flowers, adorned with the supreme mountain and 4 continents, I visualize as a Buddha land and offer it. May all migrators experience such a pure land. To the gurus who possess the 3 kayas, I offer the outer, inner, secret, and suchness offerings. With my body, wealth, and all phenomenal existence, please grant the unsurpassed supreme attainment. Whatever slight virtue I may have gathered through prostrations, offerings, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate it all to complete awakening. Om Guru Devata Kini Ratna Mandala Pratija Soha. Please turn the wheel of Dharma of the greater, lesser, and common vehicles in accordance with the dispositions and mental capacities of sentient beings. Ndruje Jamwandile Naro Dhamma Mi Dapo Padu Jidin Kunkadin Sunten Zawela Mesha Saju Lama Yidam Chokyong La Sowa Depso Daji Jin Jilo Kyo Dengi Tome San Lingen Dape Don Sun Yong La Kyo Tsume Gyawa Durje Changpa Jidin Kumpo Shabla Dodo Tato Samgyo Kyo Le Me Jinji Lo Shi Tuje Je Ninge Mumba Sene Gyam Sentro De Duto Bra Jin Jilo Jin yu jin na jang sang pe ma ge sa tambo la ya sen cho ging ngo do nye pe ma ju ne she shu da ko do kan do mang bu ko ge ge je se da do ge jin ji lo che she so guru pe ma se de ho men chu ki yi gin po da ne do sun san je kun ji ngo mo ni ran sen cho gong ngon sun ton ze ba za we la me sha bla so wa de. So again, good evening, good morning to everyone that is with us today. I really appreciate that I have this opportunity to spend some time in a meaningful way twice a week with all of you to learn more about this text composed by Shantideva, which we can say kind of distills all the Mahayana teachings, into this one, not too short, not too long volume, that brings together all the trainings that bodhisattvas have to go through in order to actualize the final result of complete Buddhahood.
好，晚安各位，早安或者是晚安各位。就是李博士说他非常珍惜2个星期一次这样非常殊胜的时间，可以一起来带领大家阅读这一部著作，这一部《入菩萨行论》。这部《入菩萨行论》是已经就浓缩了整个大乘教法。而且就是将所有的大乘教法，然后浓缩到这个并不太长也不太短的这一部著作中，然后是将所有菩萨的一种行持，就是都清楚的罗列或者是说明出来。
When we say, when we use here in this context the name Mahayana, we should understand that this is not a label identifying, say, like, oh, the kind of Buddhism in Korea, or the kind of Buddhism in China, or the kind of Buddhism in this place or that place. We're not using this label Mahayana in this way.
然后当我们在这里提到大乘这个语词这个名相的时候，我们需要了解的就是它不是用来标签出现在韩国，然后中国或者是日本等地的佛教，我们不是用，就这个语词不是用在这个方式。
Here, Mahayana, which literally means the great vehicle, is referring to practicing the Dharma, practicing the Buddha Dharma, with this great motivation of achieving Buddhahood for the sake of all mother sentient beings. That's all we mean, when we say the Mahayana practices, Mahayana teachings, Mahayana tradition. We're talking about any and all of those teachings and practices that emphasizes that the only meaningful goal that we should aim for is this goal of achieving Buddha, achieving the awakened state, the fully awakened state, for the sake and the benefit of all beings. This is the definition of Mahayana.
在这里，大乘基本上它表达的就字面上的意思来说，它是大的一个交通工具，然后基本上是说这一个传统，它是修习所有一切的佛法，然后是这样的一种修行是建立在一个大的动机上，是为了一切众生的利益而去修持的，这个是我们所要强调的。然后它就是当我们谈到这个世界上最有意义的一个目标是什么，就是为了一切众生的福祉，我们要成就圆满的觉悟的境界，这个就是大乘的一个概念。
Then whenever we hear terms like Maha, when somebody says great, this is the greater, then immediately, right, a thought arises. Then what is the lesser? If this is the greater, what is the lesser? Right? So likewise, then there's the term called Hinayana, lesser vehicle.
然后当我们谈到大马哈这一个语词的时候，然后当下就会有一个念头说，那它相对的小是什么呢？所以在这边就是它相对于大就有一个小圣或者是 Hinayana 这样的一个用词。
Now here again, lesser vehicle or Hinayana, again, we don't use it as a label to refer to the type of Buddhism practice in this culture or that country or this place in Southeast Asia or that other place. No, we're not using this label Hinayana as a way to identify, right? certain groups of Buddhists that exist in the world today. Rather, just like the way we're using the term Mahayana, here then Hinayana means practicing the Buddha Dharma for primarily our own freedom from suffering.
那小圣并也不是作为一个标签来说明现在在这个文化或者是那个国家正在进行正在发生的某一种佛教传统，不是作为一个去标签某一种现存有的某一类佛教徒，而小圣最主要他要表达的是以怎么样的动机在修持佛法，然后这个动机基本上是主要以个人解脱为主。
So especially here, for example, especially on this topic, Gyoba Jigten Sumgan, founder of Drigong Kagyu, he points out, you cannot say that Hinayana practitioners don't have love and compassion. He says, of course, Hinayana practitioners have love and compassion, because the practice of love and compassion is universally taught by the Buddha to all his disciples. So he says, Hinayana has love and compassion. Mahayana has love and compassion. But Mahayana has something that in the Hinayana approach doesn't have. And what is that? That's bodhicitta.
特别是在这个主题的范围里面，然后护主仁波切就是提出说，我们不能说就是小圣的修行者他们就没有慈悲，然后其实大圣小圣基本上都会修持慈悲这样的一个概念，它是非常普遍性的，然后只是在大圣的修持里面，比小圣多了一个不一样的内容，那个内容就是菩提心。
Is love and compassion, right? On the basis of love and compassion, then given rise to the great resolve, the courageous resolve to do whatever it takes to become Buddha, so that as Buddha, as fully awakened ones, we can more effectively benefit all sentient beings.
在慈悲的基础上面，然后去升起菩提心，然后成就无上的佛果位，便能够有效的利益一切众生。
So this great resolve, this courageous resolve that we call bodhicitta, this is what makes, whether we are practicing Hinayana or we're practicing Mahayana, is determined by this absence or presence of this great motivation.
所以这个大愿心被称为菩提心的这样的一个愿心，就是区分到底我们是在修持大圣还是在修持小圣的教法，就是建立在这个菩提心是否存在。
So if you ask me, right, I would say, well, among those who practice Chinese Buddhism, there are many who are Mahayana practitioners, and there are many who are Hinayana practitioners. Among Theravada practitioners. There are many that are Mahayana practitioners, and there are many that are Hinayana practitioners. Likewise, among those who practice Tibetan Buddhism, there are many who are Mahayana, and there are also many that are Hinayana. Because it is not about what you chant, it is not about what sutras you read or you don't read, it is not about whether you venerate bodhisattvas or you venerate the great arhats. It's not about whether you know Pali or Sanskrit or Tibetan. It's not about those things. It's about this absence or presence of bodhicitta.
然后如果问李博士的话，他会这么说：在所有修持中国佛教的修行者来说，有些是修持大乘教法，有些是修持小乘教法。然后在上座部的这个佛教来说，有些是修持大乘教法，有些是修持小乘教法。同样的，在西藏佛教里面，有些是修持大乘教法，有些是修持小乘教法。那并不是我们到底在受持什么，在持诵什么，或者是我们读怎么样的经典，或者是我们是礼敬大阿罗汉还是菩萨，懂不懂巴利语或者是梵语，都不是这一切来决定我们所修持的内容，而是在于菩提心是否存在。
Now, of course, you can say, perhaps, that, but in Tibetan Buddhism and in Chinese Buddhism, there is so much talk about bodhicitta, generating bodhicitta, generating bodhicitta, generating bodhicitta, the bodhisattva path, the bodhisattva this, the bodhisattva that. Then you say, surely, right, they are all Mahayana. Well, I don't think it's so straightforward. Because sometimes, if we talk a lot about bodhicitta, but we have not actually generated bodhicitta, then it's just empty talk,
然后当然，你可能会说，那在西藏佛教或者是在中国佛教里面有非常多就谈论升起菩提心的内容，或者是关于菩萨的这一方面或者是那一方面。那很肯定的，这一切就是关于大乘的教法，其实并没有那么的直接。很多时候我们谈非常多，但是我们没有去升起的话，那一切都是空谈。
On maybe deluded perception, I find that, among those who practice Tibetan Buddhism, especially in Asia, I think, sometimes, I even wonder, are they even practitioners of Buddha Dharma? Forget about whether they are even Hinayana, they are Mahayana. Sometimes I'm not even sure if they are actually practicing Buddha Dharma. Why? Because if we practice Buddha Dharma, one of the clearest signs of whether we're practicing Buddha Dharma or not is whatever it is that we're practicing, are they in service of the 8 worldly concerns? Or are we practicing the Buddha Dharma to be done with the 8 worldly concerns? So especially, in Tibetan Buddhism, because the Vajrayana methods are very extensive, and it's easy to misunderstand these Vajrayana methods, because Vajrayana methods, right, will say, we'll have like, this is for longevity, this is for abundance, this is for attraction, this is for this is for that. That can very easily be misinterpreted and mispracticed to puff up the 8 worldly concerns. And if we're using Dharma if we're using Buddha Dharma in that way, then it's not even, we have not even yet entered the path to liberation, much less liberating all mother sentient beings.
然后就是特别是在亚洲，当我们修持西藏佛教的时候，其实就有时候黎博士会有疑惑，就是说有些修行者他们是不是真的在修持佛法？因为真正在修持佛法的，它最明显的一个象征，就是到底我们是不断的去拥护八世间法，还是我们用佛法来去除对治八世间法？因为金刚乘的方法它非常的广泛，然后有时候就它的方法会很容易被误解，然后因为在这一些方法里头会有很多祈求长寿啊，然后财源广进之类这样的一些内容，然后就会很容易进一步的去滋长这个八世间法。然后如果有这样的一种关怀的话，其实那不要说是修持解脱道，那更不用谈是菩萨道了。
Yeah, so anyway, these are some kind of preliminary remarks that I hope we will kind of remember. Yeah. So when we say, the Bodhicharyavatara is the main subject in Bodhicharyavatara is the subject of the quintessence of Mahayana practice, Mahayana path. What we're talking about is this great motivation that we call bodhicitta.
这一些是一些前行的一些备注希望大家可以记得。那所以在这个入菩萨行论里面，我们可以看到说，是一个大乘修持的一个最主要的点，是在于我们怎么去培养菩提心。
So we are now in chapter 4. In chapter 3, we have taken the Bodhisattva vow. We have generated bodhicitta, aspiration bodhicitta. And so then now, how do we carry out the engagement bodhicitta vow? We have generated both. In chapter 3, we have generated both the action bodhicitta vow, and we have generated the action bodhicitta vow. So now, starting in chapter 4, Shantideva starts talking about how do we now put into work these two aspects of bodhicitta. So first thing is, in chapter 4, the title is carefulness. How to take care not to compromise the vow that we have just taken.
好，我们现在在第4品。那3品我们谈到就是去升起愿菩提心和行菩提心，然后去受持相应的菩萨戒。那现在我们进一步的来谈，我们应该要怎么去执行我们已经发下的这个誓言，我们应该怎么做呢？所以首先第一步，我们就是要非常谨慎不放逸，去好好的照顾，让我们的誓愿不会轻易的就是被牺牲掉或者是妥协。
This carefulness is necessary to prevent us from giving up our vow through neglect, giving up our vow through the afflictive emotions taking over.
这个谨慎不放逸是非常重要，是保护我们不会轻易的舍弃我们的 这一个誓愿，就是在烦恼的影响下去舍弃这个誓愿，或者是其他因素的情况下去舍弃誓愿。
So we have looked at verses 1 to 12, and we ended at around 12. And basically, in those verses there, Shantideva is kind of pointing out, and say that, we have taken such an amazing, unbelievable promise. And now we don't have the choice anymore to say, oh, actually, I was kidding. Oh, actually, I didn't mean it. It says, now we cannot let down. So using kind of emotional language, he says, don't let down the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas because they were so happy when we took this vow. Also, don't let down sentient beings because they were so hopeful when we invited them to come along with us on this journey to great awakening. And then if now you the day after, so to say, you woke up and you say, oh wait, actually I don't mean it. He says, that would be really terrible. So he even uses very strong language and says, breaking a promise like that. If you break the promise to one person, if you break your promise to make one person happy, and that has negative consequences, can you imagine breaking your commitment to bring all beings to happiness? He says, that kind of breaking of promise, can only lead to terrible futures in the hell realm. So very strong words even. So he's now using a little bit of like scare tactic, which has its place. Sometimes we think Dharma is all just relax and easy, and then no way we can fight the afflictive emotions.
那过去我们上一次我们已经就是看过第1到第12偈，然后基本上在这一些偈颂里面，吉天菩萨他就指出，我们已经受持了这个那么有意思、那么重要的一个誓愿，现在我们没有太多其他的选择，我们必须要好好的去实行它。我们不能够让佛菩萨失望，因为他们在我们受持这个誓愿的时候，就是感到非常的高兴，非常的随喜赞叹。而我们也不能够让一切众生失望，因为他们是那么样的充满着希望，被我们邀请来一起前往成就这个圆满的觉醒的一个境界。所以如果我们现在就是去让他们失望的话，或者是我们背弃我们的誓言，如果我们只是背弃一个人的誓言，对一个人的誓言，其实那个结果也会非常的糟糕，更何况是对一切众生的誓言，那将会导致我们陷入非常糟糕的一个未来。所以在这边吉天菩萨用了非常强烈的语气，甚至带有一点威胁的口吻，是希望我们要认真对待我们的誓言。
So verses 2 and 3, he's saying, in case you have what we call bias regret, during this pandemic, I'm sure, you've gone online and, you're feeling a little bit down and you hit buy, then the next day or the day after or 2 days later, you're like, oh, why did I buy that, right? Bias regret. So in case you have bias regret with reference to generating bodhicitta, verse 2 and 3, he's saying, don't, because the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have already analyzed this product, so to say, and this is the best thing that you can do. So stay the course. Don't waver from that. That's 2 and 3. 4, 5, and 6. it's basically saying what I mentioned earlier. Now that we have made this promise, that has made the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas so happy, and also made all sentient beings so hopeful that we are going to accomplish this goal for the benefit of all. If we now say, oh, sorry, I was just joking, I wasn't thinking straight, then it says, that can lead only to the lower realms. So that's 4, 5, and 6.
好，第2到第3季，它其实是吉天菩萨是要提醒我们，就是万一我们因为一种不小心而开始，就因为先前不小心受持了这个菩提心菩萨戒，然后就开始有点后悔的话，然后吉天菩萨就劝勉大家千万别后悔，因为这个是诸佛菩萨已经就是分析过，这是最好的一条路，最好的一个管道，是对我们来说最理想的，所以千万别后悔。那在第4、第5和第6季的话，基本上就像先前所提到的，就是既然我们已经就是发下了这样的一个誓愿，让诸佛菩萨高兴，让所有的一切众生都感到非常的有希望。那我们现在如果说我们纯粹只是开玩笑的话，那会导致我们陷入就是非常糟糕的一个局面，就可能就是到地狱道中，然后就非常的严重的后果。
7 and 8 further makes that point. 7 is almost, you can say, is raising a counterpoint or raising a doubt and say, wait, aren't there examples of some great beings who gave up bodhicitta, but then in the end, they were okay? So 7 says, those cases that you're thinking of, it's not as straightforward as you think it is. And then it goes on to say, basically, on verse 8, it says, basically, for bodhisattvas, there is no greater danger than giving up this promise that we have made. In fact, all the other negative actions of body, speech, and mind will not have such a devastating effect as us losing our bodhicitta, losing this resolve, losing this great vow, losing this commitment that we have made. Because when we, so it says, guard this carefully, carefully.
第7到第8季基本上就提出了一个疑问，然后这个疑问就是说，就是在经中就有提到有一些大修行者，他们放弃了这个菩萨的誓愿，但是后来他们也一样可以证得解脱，那有什么问题？然后吉天菩萨就回答说，其实业果并不是我们所看到的那样的直接，所以对于一切菩萨来说，没有任何一种伤害比放弃菩提心是更严重的。
9 and 10 warns us to be careful with our own conduct, so that our conduct will not cause others to give up their bodhisattva vow. I mean, 9 and 10 on the surface is saying, don't obstruct, don't halt the merit of a bodhisattva. Because doing that is you're basically not just ruining that one person, but all the beings that person was making a commitment to free from suffering. If you do anything that causes this one person to fall away from their promise, their vow, then the consequences are very serious. So here I will say, well, what is the easiest way we could do that? It is if we're not careful with how we conduct ourselves and cause someone else to give up on bodhicitta, then that is how it happens. So So especially those of us, who say, I take the Bodhisattva vow, I generate the bodhicitta, we have to be very careful that our actions of body, speech, and mind is not going to cause someone who is more new in this to be discouraged by the way we act. So the way we act is really important, even though ultimately it's the intention behind our actions that determine the result of our actions, the quality of our actions. But nonetheless, how we act is what other people can immediately see. So if our actions is causing other people to lose faith in the practice of the Bodhisattva way, then we have done something very negative.
第9到第10和第10偈，这2偈基本上是提醒我们要非常小心我们自己的行持，不要造成别人去放弃他们的菩萨的誓愿，是他们的菩提心，不要去阻碍、妨碍想要去执持菩萨行持的某一些众生，因为我们不只是就是伤害那个众生而已，更重要的是那个众生他所连接的，他所有缘跟他有缘的其他众生，其实我们也一并的让他们的利益得到损害，受到损害。所以那我们应该怎么做呢？我们必须要非常的小心自己的行持，特别是我们的身语意，不要去造成其他在菩萨道上就相对的比较新的这一些修持者，他们感到非常的失望，然后就放弃了这一条修持道。然后虽然我们知道说，就是我们一切的行为都是由我们的动机所主导，但是我们表现出来的这个行为是他人可以看得到的，而且是可以直接影响到他人，因此而失去信心。那如果我们做出这样的一个行为的话，将会造成非常非常严重的影响。
Yeah, so we should not, misapply those teachings that say intention determines the quality of our actions, and say, well, my intention was good, so then how I act is not my problem if other people misunderstand me. No, you cannot do that. And the Buddha, that's why the Buddha gave prescriptions and proscriptions, gave advice on how we should act and how we should not act, how to maintain right speech, how to even walk, how to sit. Of course, some of these rules are particular to the time of the Buddha, but from those rules we can understand what's the principle behind those things. Like, for example, in some of the rules it says, so for monks and nuns, when you eat, you should not talk. Because culturally, that at that time, it says, if you're eating and talking and it's very uninspiring, right? Because lay people at that time cannot accept that. That after they offered food to the monks and nuns, instead of like mindfully eating the food, and they're busy, talking away, right? But like His Holiness the Drigung Kyabgon, he says, he mentioned one time, he said he told some of his monks, he says, but now that if you're going to the West, when you eat, he says, if you are with a group of people, he says, of course, still we remember the monastic rule that says you should not talk when you're eating. And he says, but then you cannot rigidly follow that because in the West, people will think you are rude or greedy to eat, no time to pay attention to people around you. So he said, then you also need to adapt. So that's like the principle behind the rule, which we can still take to heart. And basically the principle behind these rules is, do not do things to cause other people to kind of have doubts or to give up on practicing Dharma. So this responsibility is very important, especially for those who kind of present themselves as teachers of Buddha Dharma. But even as just practitioners of Buddha Dharma, we should appreciate this point. Don't act recklessly. Especially those who are involved in Tibetan Buddhism, you know, some of us love so much crazy wisdom, you know. And Dalai Lama says, most of the time it's just crazy and no wisdom. Most of the time it's just crazy, as in your afflictive emotions are in charge, but because you have heard some superficial Dharma, you now say, oh, this is crazy wisdom. It says mostly it's just crazy. Because authentic crazy wisdom, when these great beings act, even if they act in ways that seems in other ways kind of outrageous, you know, but for it to be upaya, meaning skillful means, then it has to achieve the intended result. For crazy wisdom or upaya to really be upaya, skillful means, it has to achieve the intended result. If you act and then what happens is people go, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I'm not going to practice this tradition anymore. And they run away. That is not skillful means. That is destroying Buddha Dharma.
所以我们不能够就是滥用说，就当然我们常听到的教法就是会提到我们的动机决定我们的行为，我们不能够因为我们的动机我们动机是好的，然后我们就随意的让我们的行为就是表现出来非常的粗糙，然后甚至会影响到别人，会让别人误会我们自己，那是不对的。我们应该，所以在佛法里面，佛陀就是非常明文的会提到我们应该怎么表现我们自己，我们应该怎么说。然后当然所提到的内容大部分是发生在佛陀的时代，但是其实它背后的精神在现代还是一样可行的。例如举一个例子，就是对于大部分对于就是僧团，就是比丘比丘尼来说，就是吃饭的时候不应该说话，因为在从文化的角度来看的话，就是边吃一边说话是非常的不能够不可行的，就是在家居士不太能够接受，因为就是应该在吃饭的时候是非常专注然后觉知的吃饭，而不是这样的散心的在处理。但是有一次就是子贡法王就有提到，就有这样劝勉他的这个僧团，然后就说，那在西方的话，如果和一大群人在吃饭，然后我们要记得就是说吃东西的时候不要说话，但是如果有需要的话还是一样可以参与，因为在西方这个文化里面会认为，如果当你一边吃就是非常专注在吃，却没有去理会别人的提问或者是跟他人互动的话，可能会被认为是一种 粗鲁的表现，或者是非常贪执在食物中的一种表现。所以我们要了解的是这一些条例背后的精神，而不是执着在它的表象。然后我们不要去做任何事情是会导致别人就产生疑虑，或者是就会放弃修行，特别是那些就标签自己是老师，哪怕是像我们就是修行佛法的人，我们这样的一个规则，其实对我们也是有利益的，就是不要非常的莽撞的去表达我们的行为。那在西方，就是很多人会非常的喜欢，就是所谓的疯狂的这个智慧，但就是达赖喇嘛尊者就是说，其实大部分的时候只有疯狂而没有智慧。真正的疯狂的智慧，其实它是一种，虽然它表现出来是非常引人注目，或者是看起来很奇怪，但是它实际上是一种善巧方便，而那样的善巧方便，它是能够达到某一个就是所既定要的一个结果。那如果表现出来并没有达到那样的结果，而导致其他人就是所摄受的那个群众反而就是对佛法产生疑虑的话，那就不是善巧方便。
Then verse 11 basically says, okay, now next thing is don't do this thing where, you take one step forward, then you take 2 steps backward. Then you take 2 steps forward, then you take 1 step backward, and back and forth, back and forth. You mix powerful downfalls with powerful bodhicitta, back and forth like that. Then you are just going to be what we say, walking in a circle, and never actually reaching your destination. Don't do that. That's verse 11. And 12 says, in summary, I have to be careful. I have to pay attention to protect this vow that I have just taken. So the rest of this chapter are various kind of considerations, various meditations to keep us being alert and protective of a bodhisattva vow.
11偈就是说，就提醒我们不要就是一面受持这个菩萨誓愿，然后一面却去犯下种种的这一个戒堕，然后就很像就是在绕圈圈一样，那我们哪都去不了。那第12偈基本上是一个就是摘要，这个摘要就提醒我们必须要非常的小心，来好好保护我们的菩萨誓愿。然后12偈以后的所有的这些偈颂，基本上是各个不同样的内容，提醒我们要怎么样更谨慎小心不放逸的保护我们的菩提心。
So 13, verse 13 and 14, let's read that together. Striving for the benefit of all that lives, unnumbered Buddhas have already lived and passed away. But I, by virtue of my sins, have failed to come within the compass of their healing works. And this will always be my lot if I continue to behave like this. And I will suffer pains and bondage, wounds and laceration in the lower realms. Yes, so here, this verse, these 2 verses, is saying that we really have to pay attention to implementing the teachings, the precepts that is associated with the Bodhisattva vow.
那这2偈基本上是提醒我们真的要非常小心专注去实践，就是和伴随这个菩萨誓愿的这一些学处。
And he's also saying, you know, like so many Buddhas have come and gone, you know, even though it is very hard. In another context, it is very hard to encounter Buddhas when they appear and to have access to their teachings. But nonetheless, you know, with so many Buddhas that have come and gone, surely we have met the Buddhas, some of them, or at the very least, we have received teachings. But how come we are still here? Here in a confused way? That's because each of those past encounters, we have not put in enough effort to actualize those teachings. So now he says, you know, now, don't waste time anymore.
那在这里就是吉天菩萨就提到，过去那么多佛就是出生，然后就进入涅槃，然后确实非常困难能够遇到佛，然后接受他们的教法。但是肯定的，我们在过去肯定也遇过一些佛，然后在他们座下接受教法。但是为什么我们依然在这边？那是因为我们并没有足够的努力去实践这一些教法，所以现在千万的不要再浪费时间，我们必须要精进。
And then, like, due to our pride, you know, we have received the teachings. Due to our pride, then we face obstacles in connecting to a guide, a teacher, who can guide us. Yes, of course, in the end, nobody can take medicine for you. You are ill, you have to take the medicine. But if you don't go to the doctor, it's going to be very hard to get well. Simply just like, not simply, but, you know, like doing it on your own, you know, like attending all the online teachings that you can find, you know, and then, you know, buying all the books that you can buy, reading, listening, it's good. Yes, of course. But if we don't have enough merit, you know, to kind of rely on someone and have that someone kind of say, okay, now you focus on this. And have enough merit, not to want to argue, well, I don't know, I think I should. Like, we have already done so much of that, I'm sure, you know. So we're walking around and around and around and around and around. And so this also we have to pay attention to.
当然我们也因为自己的我慢，所以我们在接受或者是受持教法的时候，我们会遇到各种各样的障碍，就是去能够遇到我们的指导者，就是能够遇到一个可以怎么样去引导我们的人，因为在最后其实没有任何人可以代替我们去吃药。如果我们不去到医生那里，我们其实本身是很难能够痊愈的。当然会觉得说，我可以自己做，然后我去参加各式各样的这一种教导，其实非常好。但是如果我们没有足够的福的因缘去依赖上师的引导，或者是有某个人可以指导。
So that's why verse 13 it says, you know, but I, you know, by virtue of my sins have failed, by virtue of my negative karma, have failed to come within the compass of their healing works. So we have not been able to come close to these Buddhas. So it's not just limited to the Buddhas. Now that Buddhas have passed, you know, but there are nonetheless other guides that again due to our own negative karma that then manifest as pride, reluctance, doubt, or fear. Sometimes it's fear of the unknown, fear of commitment. We keep circling. So then we cannot be healed.
那我们除了基于我们自己的我们，可能也因为我们害怕那些未知，所以我们一直就在不断的原地踏步，没有办法就是去好好的依循师长的学习。
Now, of course, then the opposite problem also exists, people chasing after this person or that person and say, oh, be my teacher, be my teacher, be my teacher. That's also not properly relying on a guide. That is just chasing after fame. Usually we only chase, people with fancy names, fancy titles,
相对来说，就是另外一端，我们可能就不断的去追寻某一个可能就非常有名的一个上师，然后希望他能够成为我们的导师，然后其实那都是一种追星的一种行为。
So now let's read. Actually, we'll take a quick break here. After that, we come back. We'll look at 15 to 20. Let's take a short break right now.
好，我们现在先休息一会儿。
5-10 minutes. Okay, let's see questions. Let's see. Antonio, go ahead.
Well, I wrote the question in the chat, but I can.
Yes, why don't you go ahead and...
Yeah, well, I was wondering, like, bodhicitta is very such great intention, and it is precious, and it is a way to guide us in the way in a greater manner. Well, like you can expand your intention, and you know, so take it the bodhicitta vows are important in that sense because it brought our spiritual growth. But well, and also we have Hinayana vows that protect us from negative, doing the negative actions that will lead us to suffering and to generate merit also in some way. So breaking both sets of vows are well, don't have positive results. They have negative results. But it seems that forgetting bodhicitta could be easier than breaking some Hinayana vows. So for us that maybe our commitment is weak, how can we purify breaking bodhicittas or bodhisattva vows?
Technical answer, 35 Buddha's confession. Wei Ting, were you able to hear the question?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, yeah. So you can summarize the question and then the answer. So the technical answer is for purifying lapses and breaking of bodhicitta, commitment, neglect, forgetting, is to do the 35 Buddhist confession practice.
然后刚刚有一个问题就是说，然后这位同学他说，我们知道就菩提心是非常殊胜的一个动机，然后受持菩萨戒是非常殊胜难得的，因为它会带领我们往更宽广的一个方向，然后就是小乘的这个誓愿又能够保护我们免于就是负面的一些结果，而且也会带给我们很大的一个功德。那相对于这两种不同的戒来说，似乎要忘记菩萨戒，似乎相对的来说比较容易。那可能是因为我们自己的一个承诺相对的比较弱一点，那应该怎么样去就是清除我们这样的一个罪孽就是忘掉了我们的菩萨誓愿，然后从技术的层面来说，我们就是进行35佛忏。然后就能够去除，然后清除这一个忘却菩提心的过患。
You mentioned the Hinayana vows that you said in contrast to the bodhicitta resolve. It's easier to see when you have broken the Hinayana vows. So by that, I assume you're talking about things such as the 10 non-virtues to avoid, which, by the way, as a footnote, Kyoba Rinpoche says that's not just Hinayana. The avoidance of the 10 non-virtues on all 3 levels, under individual liberation, under bodhisattva commitment, under tantric samaya, it's all about avoiding leaving behind the 10 non-virtues. Yes. So if you know how to practice this, when you keep the practice of avoiding 10 non-virtues, So that's good, because that's like a clear reference point. Your 10 non-virtues are like this, like this, like this. So when you have these 10 non-virtues that are kind of explicitly there in terms of whether you will break or not, you can see clearly. Then it's very easy to make that into a Mahayana level of practicing, because you avoid the non-virtue of killing. Why? For the benefit of beings. You avoid the non-virtue of using harmful words, divisive words, and the non-virtues of speech. And then you do it because of wanting to benefit beings. So if you practice the 10 non-virtues based on not the limited motivation of I don't want to get in trouble, but rather for the benefit of beings, then there is no need anymore to think in terms of like, oh, this is this over here and this is this over here.
然后就是李博士进一步的就是澄清说，因为这些同学就把小乘的誓愿，然后和菩提心的誓愿，然后做一个对比。但是就是护主仁波切就提到，其实在3个不同样层次的就是戒里头，也就是小乘的别解脱戒，然后大乘的菩萨戒，还有就是金刚乘的这个密咒誓愿，其实都是建立在远离或者是断除十不善的基础上。如果你知道怎么去修持的话，那你就知道，当我们在受持十不善的时候，在受持避免十不善的时候，我们清楚的知道应该怎么做这十不善，但是我们可以调整我们的动机。那如果纯粹为了个人的利益而去避免十不善，那个是属于小乘的一个动机。但是如果我们要去避免这十不善，是建立在为了利益一切众生而做的话，那这个本身就是属于大乘的一个修持了。
Then repeating the Bodhicitta vow, as Gilbert Rinpoche, those of you who practice in Dragong tradition, the opening prayers, all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me. So that's the aspiration bodhicitta. Then the action bodhicitta. Throughout the day, it says 6 times in your waking hours. You should, check in with that. Called checking in, right? So you find ways to work that into your daily life. But in another discussion, Kyoba Rinpoche says, also know that once you have generated this vow through a ceremony, in other words, in a formal way, you have generated this vow, then this vow is like a $100 note that you have in your wallet, that you may or may not at all times think, I have $100, I have $100, I have $100, I have $100, but it's there. So in a way, having the bodhicitta doesn't mean, like at all times walking around, you're like, bodhicitta, 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 bodhicitta. But what it does mean is that the example given is like, you have to kind of blend your identity and bodhicitta in such a way so that, for example, even when you're asleep, and when you hear somebody say, Antonio, Antonio, right? Immediately, even if you're asleep, half asleep, or in a dream, you know they're talking about you. Right? So it's not like you walk around, even in your waking hours, forget about your sleep hours, that you go, I'm Antonio, I'm Antonio, I'm Antonio, I'm Antonio. That's not, that's not how you are required to hold the bodhicitta vow. Oh, I have bodhicitta vow, I have bodhicitta vow, I have bodhicitta vow, I have bodhicitta vow, So you don't have to actively, but you have to have an awareness enough that when you need, you go, oh yes, I have $100 in my wallet.
在我们就是晚课的内容里面，就是我们常常都会持诵到关于那个愿菩提心和行菩提心的内容，特别就是在职工嘎举的这个晚课的内容中，然后就持续持诵这样的一个菩萨誓愿，在我们日常生活就不同的时段，然后就持续的去忆持这样的一个内容，就是一种修行的方式。然后据说就是在一天里面可以长达六次，就不断的去持诵这样的一个内容，忆持这样的一个内容，所以是尝试各种方式，怎么样把这样的一个内容和我们的日常生活结合在一起。然后副主任国际就说，那当我们透过正式的方式去升起、去受持这个菩萨戒的时候，其实就很像我们口袋里面就装了就是100块。我们不需要恒常无时无刻都记得我口袋里有100块，但是它就是在那里。所以它真正的意思不是说我们要到处走，然后在不同的情况下一直要记得自己有受持了菩萨戒，而是我们能够将我们这个菩萨的菩提心，可以哪怕在任何一种情况下，只要需要的时候，我们都知道我们有这一个菩提心，记得我们有这样的一个菩提心，拥有这样的一个觉知，来了解说这个菩提心已经在我们身上了。
Yeah. So now, verse 15 to 20 from chapter 4. Let's read that together in the different languages, in the different interpretation rooms. The appearance of the Buddhas in the world, true faith, and the attainment of the human form, and aptitude for good, all these are rare. When will they come to me again? Today, indeed, I am hale and well. I have enough to eat, and I am not in danger. But this life is fleeting, unreliable. My body is like something briefly lent. And yet the way I act is such that I shall not regain a human life. And losing this, my precious human form, my evils will be many, virtues none. Here is now my chance for wholesome deeds, but if I fail to practice virtue, what will be my lot? What shall I do? Bewildered by the sorrows of the lower realms. Never there performing any virtue, only ever piling up my sins, and for 100 million ages, I'll not even hear of happy destinies. This is why Lord Buddha has declared that like a turtle that perchance can place its head within a yoke adrift upon a mighty sea, this human birth is difficult to find. So these verses here, it's helping us to kind of strengthen this quality of carefulness. meaning not becoming careless about our bodhicitta vow, right? Developing attention, developing carefulness, developing concern for our bodhicitta vow through reflecting on, through reminding ourselves of how basically we call this this precious human life that we have right now. So two things actually. First, a human life, a human existence. Then, not just an ordinary human existence, but by certain standards said to be very precious and very special. So then we'll talk about what makes it precious and special.
那在这几季基本上是帮助我们怎么去建立这个谨慎不放逸的特质，就是不要就是非常的粗心，然后去对待我们的菩提心，而是能够谨慎的关注我们这个菩萨誓愿，透过不断的去忆持我们这个殊胜难得的人生。首先，我们已经拥有了这个人生，而这个人生它并不是一个普通的人生，它是有一定的程度，它本身的价值是殊胜的，然后是难得的。
So verse 15 says, the appearance of the Buddhas in the world, having true faith, meaning true confidence, and the attainment of a human form, and an aptitude, meaning like a predisposition towards a good heart. So these four, he specifically mentions here. He says, all these are very rare, but now we have these four things. In other words, if you're reading this text, if you are hearing these teachings, all these four things you already have. But he says, have you considered, how rare it is to have these four conditions converging together, and you have this? Will this happen again so easily? No, he says.
第15季基本上是会谈到我们的出世正值佛出世的这个阶段，而且我们本身拥有这个人生，而且我们对于佛法是信受的。你曾经想过这种种的条件能够聚合是多么殊胜、多么稀有的吗？
Then he goes on, verse 16, he says, I'm healthy and well, and I have enough to eat, and I'm not in like imminent, immediate danger, So what else do I need, Don't I recognize this? Don't you recognize this? So this precious human life we have here.
那第16期进一步的就是说，我们的状况就是我们无病无痛，然后我们就是够吃，然后也没有任何的损伤，然后所有的条件都非常好，也没有就是很即刻的一些危害。然后，难道我们没有辨识到这个人生就是非常难得的吗？
Then in more detailed teachings, some of you know this. Right? There is what's called having the 8 endowments, the 8 freedoms and the 10 endowments.
更仔细的来说，其实这是关于这个人生是拥有8暇和10满的特质。
So please look at the jewel ornament of liberation for these explanation for the 8 leisure pleasures or freedoms and the 10 endowments, especially if you say, I want to take this course for credit. So this is like homework, Otherwise, like someone that was sending me a message about expressing their desire to take this for credit, they say, otherwise, they say, frankly, it's in this year and out this year, and mostly nothing sticks in between. So unless, you follow up, we say, like in the university, when I was still teaching at the university, we always tell students, now that you have come to college, actual hours that you attend class is very little compared to your high school. But don't be fooled by this. Because for every hour of instruction you receive, if you really want to do well, you should spend 3 hours on your own. On that hour of material. Because in that hour of material, the instructor is just pointing out to you places that you should follow up on. And I think this equally applies to our Dharma study. For 1 hour of class, actually now, every week we have 4 hours. So this is like 4 credit hours, right? 4 credit hours. If you are a diligent student, each hour you should do 3 more hours of work outside of class. And let's be realistic also, right? You say, no, I don't have 12 more hours to put into this, So if you don't have 3 hours to put into each hour of instruction, you should at least have 30 minutes for each hour that you are going to put work into. So what you do is, so in this part, right? Antideva here doesn't use the whole extent have such a special opportunity right now. So then my job, in teaching this is to say, you want to know more? You want more arguments to convince you of how wonderful a life you have right now? Go look at this idea of being free from 8 states that would otherwise make it impossible for you to develop spiritually. Not only being free from the 8 states, but you also have what's known as the 10 wealth endowments, the 10 wealth. And so with these 2 things, this is amazing. So basically these verses 15 to 20, you can find also what's in here, what we in another context call the 4 thoughts that turn your mind away from distractions.
这个8小时满的内容，大家可以进一步的到就解脱宝盲人里面去温习。然后对于那些想要就是学分制来学习这个课程的，那这个就是大家的功课。然后有些同学就有分享到，每次2个小时，就是很多时候就是右耳进，然后左耳出，其实什么都没有听到。然后就李博士分享到他在就是大专院校在指导学生的时候，其实1个小时的材料，1个小时的课程。然后学生其实是需要付出3个小时以外的时间，不断的去了解这一些材料，然后去需要做相关的一些准备功夫。所以可能我们没有那么多的时间来做准备，就1个星期我们已经有4个小时的课，然后如果相对要这样来算的话，我们可能就要12个小时，我们可能没有这样的时间，但是至少我们对于每个小时，我们至少花多半小时来做背后的一些准备功课，那就会让我们对于这个材料更加的熟悉。 然后就可以更了解所谓这个八暇是怎么样的一个概念，然后10种满又是怎么样的内容，然后会让我们对于我们所拥有的人生是觉得它多么的不可思议。然后这样的一个内容其实也出现在就是4种前行的这样的一个范畴里头，大家也可以去了解。
So, verse 16 is the beginning of the second of the 4 thoughts that turn our mind. Turn it from our habitual ways of like continuing in confusion. So, line 3 and 4 of verse 16, it says, "But this life is fleeting and unreliable. My body is like something briefly lent." I loan this, you know, I loan this for a short period of time. Eventually, this I have to return to the 4 elements, right? So this is the second thought, which is impermanence. Like no one, you know, really will think, you know, today is the day that I die. Everybody lives as if, you know, we're going to live forever. Then we die. So if we're not heedful, if we are not kind of like bring into focus, they say 3 things, you know. Death is certain. When it will happen is uncertain. So the second point, whether tomorrow or next life will come first, nobody knows. And then third, when we have to return this body to the 4 elements, you know, take it back to the car rental. When we return this, the only thing that we take with us is not this body and all the stuff that this body possess. The only thing that we take with us is our karma. The quality of our actions, both skillful and unskillful, follow us like a shadow follow any form. So this is the second thought, the second reversing from samsara, contemplation.
Or close.
Good. Let me grab my water and I'm ready. Huh?
Wei Ting, did you ask a question? I'm not able to hear you if you're asking a question.
Hello?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, I cannot hear you just now. Can you repeat again?
But you have to tell me what you did or did
About
not.
the impermanence.
So basically, line 3 and 4 is talking about the second thought that turns the mind, which is then in terms of that, it says, you know, we should at least once a day, at least when we wake up, you know, remember death is certain. When it will happen is uncertain. When it happens, none of this and what this owns can be taken with us. The only thing that goes with us is the quality of our actions, our karma, both skillful and unskillful. The seeds and the results, those things will follow us, which then will lead us to, in this text, to the third thought that turns the mind, which is karma. That's coming up.
那个第16偈最后前2句基本上是关于八暇十满的一个内容，就是这个人生难得的内容。然后后2句是关于这个4种前行的第2个，4种前行的第2个就是关于念死无常。 那念死无常呢，是它最主要有3个部分的内容，就是死亡是确定的，然后但是它什么时候发生，我们没有办法确定。而在死亡的时候，没有任何事情，没有任何东西可以帮助到我们，也没有任何东西我们可以带走，除了我们的业。然后这个业包括是善巧的业和不善巧的业。所以我们在日常生活要时时去忆死亡这样的一个事实，然后这样的一个内容，进而带到4种前行的第3个重点。
17 and 18, yeah? This is about karma, the third thought that turned the mind, and the fourth, which is nowhere in the 3 higher realms of samsara and in the 3 lower realms of samsara, nowhere in this cycle of birth and death can we find true and meaningful freedom. So anyway, 17, right? It says, and yet, the way I've been acting, for sure, I'm not going to have this human rebirth again. Instead, I will lose, all the advantages that I've gained. And instead, all the negativity will increase. So now, when I have a chance to really kind of do something about the opportunity that I have now, if I don't take this opportunity and practice virtue, then where will I go but the lower realms?
那第17和第18即是关于第3和第4个4种前行的第3和第4个重点。然后这一个重点就关于业果，然后还有就是我们在这个生死轮回中基本上是没有真正有意义的解脱或者是皈依处。然后在第17偈我们可以看到说，就我们现在的行持，我们这个殊胜难得的人生是很难再得到。那如果得不到人生的话，我们不仅得不到人生，我们的行为还造作了非常多的恶业。那如果在日常生活中有任何的情况，我们可以去行善，而我却没有去做，那剩下的我们就会依着我们所造作的苦，我们的恶业而陷入苦趣中。
And it says here, verse 19, never when there, when in the lower realms, I will never be able to perform any virtues. Instead, my non-virtue sins will just accumulate, multiply, to the point that even the ability to hear about the happier states in samsara, even that opportunity will disappear.
那第19偈就是说，当我们陷入到恶趣当中的时候，我们不仅没有任何机会去行善，而我们所累积的恶业更是会让我们连善趣这样的名声也没办法听闻。
Now here, we don't even need to think about, or we can just think about right now. So you don't need to think about, lower realms as something that happens, after this life is over. But even now, it's saying, now when your mind is well, your body is relatively well, no major upset going on, don't take this for granted. Practice the Dharma now, meaning apply the Dharma. Again, the word practice. Sometimes it's hard to know what we're talking about. Cultivate, grow, encourage, cultivate skillful states of mind, skillful actions of body, speech, and mind. Because it's about creating a habit pattern. Is to habitualize. So we habitualize these skillful states. So while we are of sound body and mind, meaning body and mind is reasonably well, now we should apply the Dharma. Now we should practice the Dharma. Because when we do this, if we don't do this, relatively fine, get in touch with me and say, oh, I'm going through this problem, this suffering, that, what can I do? The truth is, I don't know what to say. I'm just not, powerful enough, I suppose, to feel like I have anything, that I can say that can immediately help. Because in a way, it's already very hard now. When suffering has turned up, and in that moment, you then try to do something, it's going to be really hard. So it's like saying, when things are going well, if you don't save up, right? Like make hay, the expression, when the weather is good, you make hay. Hay is what your farm animals need to eat when winter comes, because during winter, no more grass, no more fresh grass. Yeah. But if you are fooled by, oh, the grass is so lush, so green, it's going to come, and you don't, put aside provisions for winter, then finish. In the same way, now, when things are relatively stable and good, take this opportunity. Don't waste this opportunity. Cultivate our minds.
然后大家可能不需要去想到说下辈子就是这一辈子结束之后，然后可能落入恶趣还是怎么样，而是想着我们现在能够做些什么。当我们现在的身心都处于一个好的状况的时候，只是我们不要随意的糟蹋它，不要就是把它视为理所当然。现在我们就好好的去实践佛法。那实践是什么样的一个概念呢？就是我们要去培养，要去增广，要去不断的让我们善巧的心可以一直的产生，然后就是去培养这样的一种习惯模式，这样的一个习气，善心的一种习惯的习气。然后当我们不这么做的时候，然后当就是苦难来临的时候，其实我们想要做什么，其实都会变得相当的困难。就很像当冬天来临的时候，如果我们没有趁早就是准备好粮食的话，那冬天就会只能够受苦。所以我们必须要未雨绸缪，在我们还处于良好的状况的时候，就不要浪费它，好好的去培养我们的心。
So verse 20, Shantideva goes back to the first point he raised, which is don't take for granted this precious human life you have right now. In the smaller picture, don't take for granted that right now, today, things are relatively good, relatively fine, because you never know, what kind of trouble might come and disrupt the kind of more or less good state that you are in. So here in verse 20 it says, that is why Lord Buddha has declared, just like a turtle. So this example is, it says like, so there is you can say a yoke, it says here, or just like a piece of wood, a plywood, a plank of wood floating in the great ocean. In the middle of this wood, there is a hole. Then at the bottom of this ocean, there's an ancient turtle. This is how the story is told. Every 100 years, this turtle, and this turtle is blind. Every 100 years, this turtle comes up from the bottom of the ocean and stick its head out of the water to look at the sky. So then it says, the chances of this turtle's head poking through plank, searching for the turtle, and the turtle has no sight to see the plank. So the chances of this head poking through the hole, it says, that is how hard it is to get the precious human life that we have right now. Don't squander it away.
那第20季就是吉天菩萨把我们带回他最初想要陈述的那个重点，就是说我们不要把我们这一个享满难得的人生当作是理所当然，当下我们就要好好的去善用它，因为我们永远不知道接下来会发生什么样的事情，会导致我们现在相对理想的一个身心状态，然后会陷入比较糟糕的一个局面。所以为什么就是佛陀会提到说，那这一个殊胜的难得的人生就很像是一只盲龟，然后这一只盲龟它就是就存在海底，然后每100年它就会浮到海面，然后当它浮到海面的时候，在这个海上就飘了一块木头，然后这个木板，然后这个木板中间就有一个洞口。那这只龟是盲的，所以当它浮到海面要穿过，就把它的头伸出来的时候，那个头能够穿过这个木板中央的这个洞口是非常非常困难的，而我们能够得到人生的几率也是那么的渺小，所以我们不要把这个难得的人生浪费掉。
The easiest way we squander this, we feel things are not well. My neighbors annoy me. The people I work with don't appreciate me. Those people didn't smile at me. I feel, unappreciated by people at the center. All sorts of things like that, There's no end to trying to balance our life, accounting for all those things in life. Even the best accountant there's no way to balance that P&L sheet of life, profit and loss accounting. Don't do that. Instead, really understand, what we have is the best situation we have. And let's cultivate skillful states of mind. Skillful states of the heart, we can free others.
Hả? 那我们千万不要浪费这个时间，你就不断的去计算 然后我的生活有多么的不理想啊，然后我身边的人怎么对待我，我的邻居啊，我工作的地方啊，所有的东西，然后不断的在衡量这一个所谓的好与不好。其实哪怕是全世界最好的一个会计师，也没有办法去把这个不好跟不好的状况做出一个非常平衡的一个抉择。那是就与其纠结在这里，不如真正的好好的去理解我们现在所处的状态就是最理想的，而善用这样的一个状态，好好的去培养我们的心，以便能够去帮助其他人，去让他人远离痛苦。
So today we will stop at this verse. Lawrence, Larry, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Lai. In another work, I read about the analogy of the turtle, which I found very striking. And I did a very rough calculation of the odds of the turtle sticking its head through the ring. It's very simple. I just found the square footage of the oceans of the world.
Okay.
And I assumed that the yolk was a square foot.
Okay.
Okay, probability.
You're on the lecture hour.
Okay, so then that part is simple, of us being born in this world and having the freedoms and the endowments that are enumerated in texts.
Right. Yes.
And I will tell you, although I don't want to go into the details of how I arrived at some rough probabilities of these things, but much to my surprise, the odds of having such a life are way worse than the chances of the turtle poking its head through the ring. Okay. Just to give you an example, I said, well, you know, when my mother and father got together and created me, I've read that when the male ejaculates sperm, there are 500 million individual sperm cells. So right off the bat, even when your parents create my father's family is from Russia, my mother's family is from Japan, World War II happened, my father was in Japan. I mean, the chances of us being here are so low. And of course, I couldn't do
so miraculous.
A precise calculation, but I will just say it's orders of magnitude less likely that we would be here than it is for the turtle to put its head through the ring.
Yes, all the complaints, you know. This morning, you know, that guy didn't smile at me. And then for the rest of your day, you know, you have ruined it. Someone said something mean to me. For the rest of the week, you have ruined it. Or, you know, feelings of inadequacy. Which I'm not saying that, you know, like you're bad. So translators, if you can translate what Larry said, and my 2 cents.
嗯，刚刚另外一位同学就分享关于他个人对于这个盲龟怎么穿过这个木板上的洞孔，那么殊胜的一个几率，然后他谈到他个人的一个见解，但是细节因为网络上的这个不太稳定，我听得不是很清楚，所以没有办法为各位翻译，不好意思。
So we will end here today, and you'll have a good weekend. And those of you who are interested, this evening, well, evening for those of us in the Western Hemisphere, but it will be Sunday morning for those of you in Asia. His Eminence Trisa Rinpoche, I requested him to give the reading transmission of 5 kind of important sutras and tantras. And so in the Tibetan tradition especially, there is a strong emphasis on receiving the reading transmission of Buddha's words, Buddha's teachings, which is really talking about emphasizing the human-to-human connectivity, that the Dharma should not just be kind of in the abstract floating around out there, even in the shape of books, you know. Sure, it's good to have books and all that, but it's said like the life spark of these words isn't there unless it goes from person to person. So the reading transmission, even though, you know, like maybe you think, I don't know, you know, I don't know what's going on, I don't understand the language, but it's the attitude that we carry with us that can kind of change the way we experience something. So those of you who are interested, you can come on either Facebook if you don't have the Zoom information, but I did share the Zoom information on my Facebook page, my personal Facebook page, and I'm sure other people at other centers have also shared that information.
好，就是在明天早上，然后黎博士就邀请了吉舍仁波切，然后传授，然后5部重要的经和序。那在西藏佛教基本上是非常着重能够就是受持这一个持诵的一个传承。因为在西藏佛教非常着重说人与人之间的这样的一个传授是非常重要的，而不是纯粹的是就佛法是非常的抽象，就漂浮在空中这样的一种抽象的概念，而是能够透过人传人这样的一种传授，达到一种连接，然后这样会这样的一种态度其实会影响或者是会改善我们所经验到的一切，我们在这个传统修持的过程中所经验到的一切。
长住三住仁波切 Ma ge ba nam ge gyu chi ge ba nyam ba me pa yang gong ne gong du bel war shu. Okay, ta-ta everyone.
Gracias, Dr. Lai.
Thank you to all, to waiting, to Claudia.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.
Thank you, Dr. Lai. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.